Hey there. We're just a few weeks away from the American elections, and the latest Harvard Caps Harris poll, which always digs a bit deeper and asks more nuanced questions, is out, giving us some fascinating insights into how Americans view the Israel Hamas conflict and the escalation in our region. Let's break it down. First off, support for Israel. 81% of Americans support Israel over Hamas. Nothing's really changed since that question was first presented by this survey months ago. It's even up from 79% in September. But here's the catch. There's still a huge generational gap between young and old voters. Only about 60% of 18 to 34-year-olds support Israel compared to support in the 90s for the very much older generations. It's a pretty big difference, right? We're also seeing Democrats a bit less clear about this than Republicans, which is not a surprise, but still not very encouraging to think that a terrorist organization has not insignificant support in one of the Western world's superpowers. Secondly, what about whether they support a conditional or unconditional ceasefire? Most Americans, about 68%, want a conditional ceasefire. They're saying release the hostages and get rid of Hamas first. But again, younger folks and some Democrats are more likely to say ceasefire now, no conditions. Now let's look at the priorities for Americans. 62% of Americans are following our conflict closely. Still, that's up from 56% in September. But only 6% think it's the most important issue facing America right now, and 3% say it's the most important issue to them personally. No big change there, other than to recognize that this isn't what's going to decide the election results. Israelis and Jews could benefit from a little bit more humility when thinking about how important Israel really is to the average American. Somewhat worrying is the level of Middle Eastern knowledge in America. Looks like they've got some homework to do, or maybe it's Israel and the Jewish Americans' job to shed more light here to the general masses. Most Americans, especially younger ones, aren't too sure about who's who in the Middle East. Most of them know Iran's not the good guy, but when it comes to groups like Hezbollah, there's a lot of confusion. Check out the data and you'll see for yourself. And finally, 63% of Americans think the campus protests are about saving lives in Gaza, not about supporting terrorists, which is what Israelis and Jewish Americans are trying to get them to understand. It doesn't look like it's sticking, so maybe let that go and shift focus on different angles, such as protecting Jewish kids on campus against unsafe environment. When it comes to media coverage, especially after the CBS debacle with the assertive questioning of an author who openly supported Hamas's actions, Americans seem to want balance. They're saying, challenge those who seem to support terrorists, but keep the reporting fair, which is, let's be honest, a pretty reasonable way to look at it. So what's the main takeaway? Americans still generally support Israel, but there are some big generational and partisan differences. And while people are paying attention, our conflict is not their top concern. This tells us that we need to bridge some gaps in knowledge, in generational views, and in how we talk about this conflict. For the numbers and more analysis, head over to hasbaratalbox.com.